Mike is the vice president of the legendary music magazine and festival Pitchfork. Please welcome Michael Renaud.
When they asked me to come and talk today, the theme was around sound and vision, how it relates to storytelling. And I kind of latched on to the idea of storytelling through different mediums. Do your best to sort of know your audience and know the people that are going to be enjoying your stories, and be able to sort of try to give them not just give them what they want, but give them something useful and give them something good. We're a site of critics. We have a critical voice, like I said, and we like to talk about artists that inspire us and that invigorate us, whether that's an artist that's been around for a while or a rising artist that's new. So there's all kinds of stuff we do on the site, but all of it kind of comes back to our own critical voice. And when we think about storytelling and that critical voice, there's still no control over every part of the story. So beyond the website itself, we do events, 2 music festivals at the moment. So events to us are a really great way to not only sort of engage with our audience on a very real level that's not just through Twitter or something, but also to enjoy real life, which is what music is all about. But with all of that said, the choice in the medium, it tells other stories beyond the stories being told. So when you introduce new mediums, it creates a new perspective. It creates new entry points for people. I said before that, using the word content, I'm hesitant to use it. It's a word to me that feels very sterile. It's a business term. And I think the idea of a story is so pure and so timeless, and it really is what puts friendships together. It's what builds songs. It's what makes art. A story is pure in its essence. And content doesn't have to be a dirty word necessarily, but to call something content, I think the reason that maybe makes people feel slightly uncomfortable is because it takes a lot of the joy and love out of the original story itself. We started doing cover stories about 4 years ago now. This was one of our first ones for Bat for Lashes. When we were putting this together, we felt like we wanted to make something that people could really sit with and engage with on a very personal level. Doesn't have related content modules in your face and new ads and social media sort of call-outs. And people talk about the print experience, and I'll get to this in a minute too, but really the experience we were looking for was something personal. If you are a business and you are in the web business, you are going to be thinking about traffic, and you are going to think about how to make a sustainable business, and that's part of it. But when you're making your editorial, when you're making your creative pieces, you have to start first with the people that are going to be looking at it and their experience. You can't start with how it's going to be monetized. You can't start with how it's going to do in terms of traffic. You have to focus on the people first, and that stuff will come. So when we make things like this, we're thinking about art, we're thinking about voices, we're thinking about not only the artists, but the editorial teams that are putting it together and what their point of view is, and we're hoping that people can make a real connection with it. It's more about the art itself. Art directing something that would normally be art directed in a magazine because you have the luxury of 2 full-page spreads. What are you going to do there? Versus just, all right, we have the CMS and we're going to put our text in there, we're going to put our image in there. That sort of brings me to the point of the real world again, where that's been the source for us for any kind of innovation. It's not what are other people doing. It goes back to what we report on, which is music. And to us, that's a very real life experience. It's a very emotional experience. And so that sort of fixation on innovation, I think, can hold people back. I think there is this thing when you see something new on the web, you might want to try and just really do that, just to do it. And so when we put together things for the web, when we put together things in print, having something that feels pure and elegant in the sense of aesthetically pleasing through simplicity is something that lets just sort of the story sing and lets any kind of photography and visual imagery that goes along with it play its part. And so for us, we really do try to make things really impactful for people, but at the same time, pull back as much as possible. I would be lying if I said we didn't fail at that from time to time. Again, that's a huge part of design. You have to try something new that feels really uncomfortable, and you'll probably fail at it from time to time. When you are kind of working on these things and there is sort of an audience already that's built into it, you're publicly sort of putting yourself out there and letting yourself fail if you're trying to do something big. And this was one of those examples. The most stressful day of my life was being on this photo shoot. This was before people saw Daft Punk's new image, before they premiered it at Coachella 2 years ago, like 2.5 years ago. And the park ranger was like not having a closed set, even though they told us we could have one. And people were coming in and trying to like tweet photos, and there was fire everywhere. And so swing for the fences. Sometimes minimalism is underrated, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So all that talk sort of leads me to fetishizing formats and people being too aware of that medium itself. So on the digital side, I feel like on the web, there is a really low barrier to entry, and that sort of devalued the story itself. The fact that we are really used to just sort of being able to put stuff up and let it go, and to try to like sort of bring in new technological advances just for the sake of it. But I think the most popular sort of version of that in 2015 isn't about digital, it's about print. And if people have to answer the question, well, why is print still relevant, with things like, I just love like opening it up and like smelling the paper and stuff. It's like, buy some flowers. It's not like about that necessarily. There is something very real there, but that's also in some ways just nostalgia. But if we're talking about the stories having meaning, and if we're talking about our content really doing something, then there has to be more to it. And so what we sort of set out to do was create a quarterly publication that's a lot of care is put into the design of it, how it's published, the paper stock, the illustrations and photography, how it's distributed, where it ends up, how many are available, and trying to make something that really meant something to people. So if we're all spending our daily lives listening to music on the internet, when we grew up listening to music by going to a record store and talking to the record store clerk for an hour and coming away with one album that we listened to for a month, we sort of took a look at our daily business as a website and said, what haven't we done on the web yet because it hasn't made sense on the web, and does that make sense for print? And so the Pitchfork Review tends to tell a lot of stories that are really personal, and they tell stories that maybe in some ways would almost feel disingenuous or disrespectful if you put them on the internet in some ways. And that's not really a right thing to say, but there is something to it when you think, if this exists amongst advertisements that we're not sure what they're going to be, and related content modules, and they're going to be shared flippantly with really mean people on Twitter, can the publication be sort of a safe place in a way for that type of content? So it isn't just a fetish or a nostalgia trip for us. There is something very like deep and meaningful. I guess all of this rambling and mumbling and like comes back to the story itself and comes back to our love for music. When we talk about mediums and how we are sort of connecting with our audience and connecting with what we report on, that stuff ends up finding the medium and finding its venue. So it really starts with knowing your audience, and it really starts with understanding and being very empathetic of your audience and hoping that you can put good work out that they'll appreciate and it will make their lives better. And once you understand your audience and the tone and the drama of the story you're trying to tell and what that should encapsulate, then that's where you can kind of find a medium and try to find the best avenue to sort of present that stuff. Anything else is decoration. Anything else is smoke and mirrors. And trying to sort of fill up empty space for some kind of frequency quota or something like that. So you want to gift a story to a product so your audience can feel like it's a gift in and of itself. Thanks again for having me, and thanks for listening. And I hope to see you guys after this.